I was about to receive my doctorate in chemistry, but my life has not always been easy. My name is Thomas Prentice. I am 31 and engaged to Heather Thompson, a fellow chemistry PhD student. I come from the Prentice family, who owns Prentice Chemicals. My great-great-grandfather started the company. When my grandfather passed away, he owned 40% of the company. He left 30% to my mother, Dr. Joanne Prentice, and 10% to me. My mother is the CEO and likes to be in charge of everything. From what I know, that was one reason my father, George Hogan, left when I was 4 years old. Sadly, he died in a car accident shortly after leaving. You may wonder why my last name is Prentice and not Hogan. My mother changed our last name to keep the family name going after my father passed. Growing up, it felt like I didn't have a father because she removed every picture and memory of him. She also kept his family from seeing me. I always worked hard in school, but my mother had strict rules. I couldn't play sports, had few friends unless she liked them, and we never took family vacations. She thought vacations were pointless if they weren't about chemistry. I graduated at the top of my high school class, but I wanted to study chemical engineering. My mother insisted I focus on chemistry, saying, "Chemists create what chemical engineers make." I didn't fully agree, but I still did well in college, ranking in the top 5% of my class. I pursued my master's and now my PhD at Harvard, where my mother got her degree. I wanted to attend MIT or Stanford, but Harvard was on one coast, while my mother was on the other in San Francisco. This distance allowed me to grow without her constant influence. You can't earn a master's and a PhD without determination. Luckily, if I hadn't listened to my mother, I wouldn't have met my fiancée, Heather. She is 32, 5, 4, and charming. We met on the first day of our PhD program orientation. I wanted to ask her out, but my mother, during one of her visits to Harvard, saw Heather on a lab tour and made sure she joined us for dinner. Heather admired my mother a lot, which made me wonder if she liked me for my own sake or because of my mom. We dated for 2 years while in school, and I asked her to marry me after we moved in together. We plan to tie the knot once we feel secure in our jobs after graduation. After the ceremony, Heather, my mom, and Heather's parents went out for a nice dinner to celebrate. We talked about our future plans after graduation. Heather wanted to do research for a chemical company, while I aimed to work at a college for research and teaching. My mom listened with a smile but didn't join the conversation. I found it unusual that she wasn't trying to guide things, but I sensed she had something in mind. After dinner, my mom stood up to speak. "Heather, Thomas, I want to say how proud I am of both of you. I have good news. I've arranged jobs for you at Prentice Chemicals. Congratulations." Heather jumped up and hugged my mom tightly. "Thank you, I'm so happy. I hope to get a job with a chemical company." Her parents were thrilled and congratulated us. I felt uneasy, realizing my mom was trying to control my future again. I didn't want to make a scene, so I waited to talk privately with her about Heather and our plans. Later, when Heather took her parents to their hotel, I finally found a moment alone with my mom. I had mentioned wanting to explore a research position at Harvard before. "Mom, I was thinking of the research job at Harvard," I said. She replied, "But how can you and Heather get married if you're at Harvard and she's at our facility in California? You know she'll take the job." "You could have told me before announcing it," I said, feeling frustrated. "Maybe I can check out options at Stanford," I suggested. "Nonsense, you need to work at Prentice Chemicals to carry on the family name," she insisted. "We don't need to discuss this anymore." Then she left the room. From past experiences, I knew that getting a research position outside wasn't going to work for me. Even if I found something, she would use her influence to change it. For now, I guess I'd have to see how working for my mom would turn out. When Heather returned to the apartment, she was full of energy. She pulled me to the bedroom. I thought my conversation could wait until morning as we settled into bed. After a long and enjoyable night, we had breakfast together. I decided to bring up a topic that I knew might not go well. "Remember when we talked about what we would do after graduation? What happened to the job you were considering in Boston and my position at Harvard?" Heather said. "Don't be silly. Do you understand the chance your mom is giving us? I know she sees something in your research, but it feels like she wants to control me," I replied. "That's not true. She wants you to join her in this big discovery so we can take over the company when she retires," Heather responded. Just think about it. I took a few days to weigh the pros and cons. The biggest downside was losing Heather, so we decided to move to San Francisco and start working. 3 years later, Heather was close to making a breakthrough with her clean energy project. It aimed to cut airplane emissions by 50% with only minor adjustments to airplane engines. I was working on a related project, which sometimes meant I needed help from her team before I could move forward. My progress was often thanks to one of Heather's assistants, Jennifer Panish. Jennifer had a master's in chemistry and was also studying for her MBA part-time. She had a great ability to see the big picture and understand how projects connected. While Heather was really nice, Jennifer was truly impressive. She looked a bit like a famous actress. Her parents were from Thailand and had moved to Madison, Wisconsin, where Jennifer was born. She got her bachelor's in chemistry at the University of Wisconsin-Madison and later earned her Master.S at the University of San Francisco. She started working for Heather shortly after we moved to San Francisco. As time went on, Jennifer and I began spending more time together. We had lunches, and when Heather had to work late or meet my mother for dinner, she would ask Jennifer to go out with me instead. I think Heather believed that if I wasn't eating alone, I wouldn't bother her about her late hours. In the beginning, I often told her that she didn't need to work so hard. This project would take years, and I worried she would wear herself out at that pace. As usual, her response was that she didn't want to let my mother down. I convinced my mother to give Heather some time off, arguing that Heather would wear herself out. We enjoyed some wonderful vacations and long weekends during that time. When we were together, it felt just like when we were in school together. We were a happy couple. The problem arose once we returned to work, where my mother played a big role in our lives. It was like something changed in Heather when she was back with my mom. She admired my mother so much that I felt like a third wheel. We were still living together and engaged, but she never mentioned marriage, and I decided not to bring it up for now. I even suggested that since we were both earning well, we should buy a condo or a house instead of wasting money on rent, but she wasn't interested. When it came to intimacy, it depended on her work. If she had a good day and made progress, everything was great between us. But on difficult days, she seemed distant and only focused on her needs. Once she felt better, she would fall asleep quickly. As for my interest in chemical engineering, I did manage to attend some courses during my master's and PhD, which helped me understand how to turn discoveries into practical products. My project was a variation of Heather's fuel. It didn't reduce emissions quite as much as hers, but I realized there were challenges with her fuel. Manufacturing it would be tough. My version, however, would be easier to produce. Jennifer noticed this and made sure I got the information I needed. I pointed out these production issues to both Heather and my mother. My mother told me to focus on my own project and not to interfere with Heather's, calling it an important part of the company's future. That night, Heather and I had a disagreement at home. She accused me of trying to create problems for her project and caused tension between her and my mother. I understood that as long as my mother fully supported Heather's project and ignored my concerns, Heather would not see the problems either. It felt pointless to argue, so I decided to stay quiet and focus on my own work. I apologized to both of them, admitting I may have misunderstood their work. I realized they would not recognize their blind spots. I knew Heather had a weekly meeting with my mother, where they would probably discuss me and my views on her project. So I discreetly placed a recording device in Heather's briefcase. I took the recording that night and listened to it the next day. I was surprised by the low opinion both my mother and Heather had of my skills. I didn't realize my mother thought so little of me, and that Heather's view of me was affected too. My mother even said she wanted to move me into a different role away from research. I understood the hierarchy and knew I needed to leave, but I wanted to finish my research. One day at lunch, Jennifer told me she was confused too. I don't understand. Her idea looks good on paper, but it won't work financially. I agreed, saying, I know, but my mother is someone who always has ideas. She gets lucky and her products always go smoothly to production. She won't believe me. I ended up sleeping on the couch for almost a week after I mentioned this to Heather and my mother. Don't discuss it with Heather. It might hurt your career. As Heather got closer to finishing her research, There were days I didn't hear from her because she was busy in her lab. During those times, I became curious about my father and his family. I knew my parents met while studying chemistry, so I started to look into it. I hired a genealogist to help find my father's family. After a few weeks, they brought me a report. I discovered that my father's family owned a small chemical company in Los Angeles called Los A Chemicals. It seemed that an interest in chemistry ran in the family. My father's parents were no longer alive, but he had a sister named Susan Hogan, who was the VP of operations. She was married and had 2 kids but kept her last name. My great-uncle George was the president of the company, and my father was named after him. I decided I needed to reconnect with my father's side, and once Heather had some free time, I would reach out to them. Then Jennifer burst into my office. "Thomas, you need to see this. Heather is making progress and they are starting to draft the patent application. You need to read it." As I reviewed it, Jennifer and I talked about different points. Then I noticed something important. This patent covers Heather's work but has a big gap that leaves my overlapping work unprotected. "Jennifer, can we keep this to ourselves?" She looked at me unsure. "I don't trust my mother right now, and I'm worried about my relationship with Heather since we seem to be drifting apart. Not having my work protected by a patent leaves me with options." Jennifer hugged me and assured me that I could trust her to keep this secret. Finally, the day came when Heather's project was complete. It was Monday afternoon, and my mother threw a big party to celebrate Heather's work. A press release was sent out to announce the new fuel. My mother gave a speech full of praise for Heather and explained how her work would help the company grow. I stood at the back of the room, away from the festivities. Jennifer came over and took my hand. "Thomas," she said, "you should be up there with them." I replied, "If my mother wanted me up there, I would be. Besides, she asked to see me in her office after the celebration. I have a feeling I know what this is about, but I am ready." Later, I went to my mother's office for our meeting. It turned out Heather was there too. My mother began, "Thomas, I think you agree that Heather's work is a big step for the company. Because of this, I believe we should end your project since your fuel won't be as clean as hers. I am promoting Heather to Vice President of Research. I want you to move to the administrative part of the company to learn how everything works. Once you are married, the 2 of you will take over the company when I retire." Heather then chimed in, "Isn't this exciting? Your mother and I have been planning this. Once we are married, we will be a strong team for the company and help guide the next generation of the Prentice family." I had considered different possibilities. I suspected my project would be canceled, but I hadn't realized just how much they had planned without me. I decided to speak up. What if I want to continue my research? I could fund it myself. I had saved a lot from the profits of my 10% ownership in the company. My finances were my own, and I had made smart investments. My savings were over 100 million by now. Since I was attending the schools my mother chose, she had been covering those expenses. Mother replied, "Thomas, why would you waste money on that? It isn't going anywhere." "Well, if you think it's worthless, why not just sign the ownership of my research over to me? Consider it a gift in support of your plans for the company's future success." She stared at me for a moment, then looked at Heather. Heather just shrugged, and my mother finally said, "Fine, do it your way." "Great," I said, handing her the paperwork. "Just sign at the bottom of each copy and we can then focus on our future plans." She looked surprised. "What do you mean you have the paperwork?" I fought to keep a satisfied look off my face. "Well, I thought that since Heather's project was so successful, there was a good chance you would cancel mine. I want to make sure I see mine through to the end. Think of it as something for myself. Once I finish, I want to know that I achieved something. Don't worry, I will work on it when I can, and it won't interfere with my future projects here at the company." My mother looked at Heather again, surprised. They didn't expect this, but they still believed that my work wouldn't go anywhere. She took the papers, quickly looked them over, and signed both copies, one for each of us. I had already signed mine and put it safely in my briefcase as I got out the next document. "Mother, thank you. Now let's move on to the next matter." "What is it now?" she asked. I pulled out the recorder I had used to capture the meeting between Heather and my mother, where they talked about my abilities in a negative way, and played a clip for them. "Here is my letter of resignation. It takes effect immediately. Since you both have such a low view of my skills, I don't see why I should stay." They both looked at me in shock. They probably thought I didn't have the skills to record their private talks. And finally, Heather, here is my key to our apartment. I have changed the lease and utilities to your name and have already moved my things to storage. You can keep the engagement ring. I don't want it anymore. Heather looked confused. But why are you moving out? We were supposed to get married. Heather, we haven't really had much of a relationship since we moved here. We have grown apart, and the fact that you and my mother have been secretly planning my future and talking down to me behind my back shows how strained our relationship has become. It seems like you have been influenced a bit too much by my mother. I continued, for the past year we have acted more like roommates than a couple. The only real moments we shared as a couple were on vacation. You even kept asking Jennifer to take care of me. I believe it's time to end things and move on. Heather sank onto the couch in my mother's office and began to cry. My mother spoke up angrily. You ungrateful son. Do you know everything I have done for you? And this is how you repay me. I had everything set up for you, the perfect wife and a job to keep our family name strong for many years. Mother, you never thought about what I want. You pushed me in this direction, but I did the work that got me my PhD. Thank you for your guidance, but I am proud of what I have done, and now I want to follow my own path. One day I might return to Prenti's, but it will be on my terms and schedule. I turned around and walked out of my mother's office. As I closed the door, I heard my mother yelling and Heather crying. After my talk with them, I left the building and spotted Jennifer coming toward me. She grabbed my arm. What happened? She asked. I told her I had resigned and ended things with Heather. Jennifer looked surprised. She didn't know my plans. I felt I could trust her, but since she worked for Heather, I was unsure how much. Where are you going? She asked. I'm not totally sure, but I have a few ideas, I replied. Can you meet me tonight for a drink? Jennifer asked. I saw the hopeful look on her face. Sure, I said. I'm staying at the Hilton tonight. I have some errands to run, but I can meet you at the bar at 10:00. Her face lit up, and she kissed me on the cheek before saying she would see me then. As I walked to my SUV, my phone rang. It was Heather. I didn't want to speak with her just then, so I turned off my old phone and switched on my new one with my new number. I thought it would be good to have a fresh start. I jumped into my SUV and drove to the storage unit where I had been moving most of my things. It showed how little Heather noticed our relationship, that she hadn't realized I was packing things away over the past few weeks. I didn't care about most items in the apartment, just my clothes and personal keepsakes. In the back of my SUV were the items that would be most noticeable if missing. My degrees, a few special pictures, my remaining clothes, and my computer. I dropped those off at the storage unit and placed the signed agreement for my research in a lockbox provided by the company. Then I drove to the hotel. It was 9:00 p.m., so I decided to take a step toward my future. I pulled out the report on my father's family from the genealogist and called my father's sister. I felt a bit nervous as the phone rang. Finally, a woman's voice answered. Hello, Susan Hogan speaking. I cleared my throat. Hello, this is Thomas Prenti's, Hogan, your nephew. Please don't hang up. I want to say a few things before you respond. I took a deep breath. I know that my mother shut you and my father's family out of my life. I realized that was wrong. I had a genealogist look into my father's side of the family, and she gave me your contact information. I want to connect with my father's family. Can we meet? There was a moment of silence. Tommy, it's been so long. The last time I saw you was at the funeral. Yes, I'd love to meet. Where are you? When can we meet? I relaxed, releasing a breath I had been holding. I'm in San Francisco. I can fly down to LA tomorrow. How about dinner tomorrow night? She replied. That sounds great. Would it be all right to meet at my place for dinner with me and my husband? That would be wonderful, I said. We confirmed the address and the time for dinner. I ended the conversation by saying, thank you, see you tomorrow. It went better than I expected. I had forgotten that my father and his family always called me Tom or Tommy. It felt nice to hear that again. I glanced at the clock and realized I needed to book my flight after talking to Jennifer. I went down to the bar. Jennifer wasn't visible, so I found a table where I could see the bar entrance and waited for her. The waiter brought my drink, and just as I raised it to take a sip, I spotted her. Wow, I had never seen her dress like that before. She looked great in a stunning red dress with high heels. A few people turned to look as she walked toward me. She laughed lightly as she sat down. You can close your mouth unless you want to catch flies. Wow, was all I could say. I thought you might need a visual distraction after your day, she said. You definitely succeeded. I hope I didn't embarrass myself, I replied, noticing the imaginary drool. The waiter came over and she placed her drink order. So, what happened with your mother and Heather? She asked. I shared a brief summary of their plans. I explained that I had arranged to transfer ownership of my research and how I had resigned and ended things with Heather. And you just happened to have these agreements and your resignation ready? She asked. I replied, well, I could see things weren't going well. My mother viewed Heather's research as the future of the company. Once she had her completed research, my work wouldn't be needed. Heather and I had been growing apart, and she seemed to favor the direction my mother encouraged. So I met with a lawyer a few weeks ago to start preparing the ownership agreement for my research. I also planned to get my name off the apartment lease and utilities so I could move out. Jennifer said, it's my turn to say, wow. Why didn't you tell me any of this? I frowned and replied, honestly, this is probably the first time in a long while that I have taken charge of my life. I felt I could trust you, but since you work for Heather, I had to be careful to not let anything get in the way of my plans. I looked down and added, I'm really sorry for not including you. Jennifer reached over and took my hand. No, I understand. She then gently lifted my chin and smiled at me. Now it's my turn to say sorry. I've wanted to do that for a while. I want to be open with you. I really like you. I noticed how Heather treated you, so I made sure our projects kept communicating. I enjoyed our lunches and dinners and want to stay connected. I hope to remain in your life. I stared at her for a moment, thinking of our time together in the last couple of years, and smiled broadly. I would really like that. We shared a warm hug. So what are your plans? She asked. First, I will reach out to my dad's side of the family. I contacted my aunt. I haven't seen her or anyone else from my dad's family since he passed away when I was 4. After I go back to my room, I will book a flight to LA for dinner with them tomorrow night. I'm a bit nervous but need to sort things out first. My short-term goal is to finish my research on my fuel. I think there are only a few months of work left. Jennifer asked, would you like some support when you meet your dad's family? Just in case it doesn't go well, can I join you tomorrow? Thank you, that would be great. I appreciate your support. I'll book a flight and hotel for both of us. By the way, I need to give you my new phone number. I got a second phone and turned off my old one to avoid Heather and my mom reaching me. I just need some space from them until I can sort things out. We exchanged numbers. This has been a long, emotional day for you. Once you book the tickets, text me the details and I can pick you up for the airport, she said. We then stood up and Jennifer gave me a warm hug. See you in the morning. I texted Susan to see if it was okay to bring someone and she replied, the more the merrier. I went back to my room, got the flight and hotel booked, and then fell asleep thinking about that warm hug. The next day, Jennifer picked me up at the hotel and we flew down to LA. Her place was in the opposite direction of the airport, so it made more sense. We checked into our hotel. I had booked us separate rooms. Jennifer called Heather to ask for a few days off. She pretended not to know what had happened after the celebration. Jennifer told me that Heather sounded tired and asked if she had heard from me. Jennifer told her that aside from seeing me leave quickly last night, she hadn't talked to me. Heather asked if she could get me to reach out to her. Jennifer agreed but didn't ask more questions. Before going to Susan's, we met in the hotel bar for a drink to help calm my nerves. Jennifer knew a lot about my past, but I shared more details about how my mother had tried to erase any trace of my father, including changing my last name. She held my hand and told me that no matter what happened that evening, she would support me. I hugged her. The taxi dropped us off at Susan's house just before our meeting time. I brought a bottle of wine and some flowers as gifts to show my good intentions. Nathan, Susan's husband, greeted us at the door and welcomed us in. He joked about the flowers being for him and the wine for Susan before she showed up. We stood looking at each other for a moment. I could see my grandmother's face in hers. She broke the silence by saying, "It really is you. You look so much like your father." Then she came over and gave me a warm hug. They welcomed us inside. I introduced Jennifer as a friend here for support. Susan hugged her and said, "Thank you for helping him reconnect with us." Susan mentioned that dinner wasn't ready yet. She apologized for ordering food but wanted to spend time with me instead of cooking. I told her that was fine and shared a brief overview of my life. I didn't go into detail about my relationship with my mother, but included the key events. I mentioned that I had just broken up with my fiancé and left my mother's place. When dinner arrived, we all sat at the table. Susan asked, "Tommy, why are you reaching out to us now?" I took a deep breath and replied, "I realize I need to take charge of my life. My mother has controlled my path for so long. I don't regret where I am, but some recent events made me see that I wasn't heading in the direction I wanted for myself. I don't know if you knew how much my mother tried to erase my father's memory after he left and then passed away. Changing my last name from Hogan to Prentice is one example." Susan nodded and said, "Yes, your mother made it clear that you were hers and that we shouldn't be part of your life. She even took steps to keep us away. You know that we compete with Prentice Chemicals in some areas. She warned that she might try to harm our business if we reached out to you. It was very hard for my parents. First, they lost their son, then their grandson. A tear rolled down my cheek as I said, a few months ago, I contacted a genealogist to learn about my father's side of the family. When I got the report and found out my grandparents had passed away, I regretted not doing this sooner." I sighed, and Jennifer squeezed my arm to show support. I smiled at her and continued, "I know I can't change the past, but I hope we can have a future together." Susan smiled and said, "That would be great, we've been waiting. How about coming to the company tomorrow for lunch with Uncle George?" I replied, "That sounds perfect. I would love to meet him." The rest of the evening was filled with small talk. Susan and Nathan shared how they met and about their 2 children. Their son, Frank, is a high school English teacher, and their daughter, Patricia, is a chemical engineer. They hope to get Patricia involved in the family business, but she is not feeling ready for that yet. We said our goodbyes at the end of a wonderful evening, much better than I had expected. Jennifer and I returned to our hotel, said goodnight, and went to our separate rooms. About an hour later, there was a knock at the door. Jennifer asked if she could come in. She said, "I'm so glad I came. Things went well and they seem like really nice people. However, I need to get back to work on Thursday to prepare for some exams on Friday. I only have a few months left in my MBA program." "I hope you understand." I took her hands and replied, "Just having you here has meant a lot to me. I understand. I'm still figuring things out, but I know how important your MBA is, and it's important for you to keep your job. I'm okay and looking forward to meeting my great-uncle tomorrow." Then I pulled her close and kissed her on the cheek. She hugged me tightly and gave me a gentle kiss on the lips. When we stepped back, I looked into her eyes and said, "I want you in my life, but until I sort out my next steps, I can't set any expectations for us. Focus on your work with Heather and finish your MBA. We can keep in touch and meet when we can. I'm not sure if I'll stay in LA or go back to San Francisco or move around, but by the time you finish your MBA, I should have a better idea of where I'm headed, and then we can talk about our future." She looked down to think for a moment before looking back at me. "I'm going to miss you, but let's keep in touch. I have your new number. I will also keep an eye on Heather and your mother and let you know if anything comes up that you should be worried about." "Thank you," I said, giving her another big hug. She said good night and went back to her room. I had a hotel room in San Francisco for a week but needed to stay in Los Angeles for another night. I also canceled my flight back to San Francisco in the morning. I would rebook when I knew for sure when I was going back. Jennifer and I met for breakfast the next morning. We talked about various things like we usually did. Then I saw her get into her taxi. We shared a nice hug and kiss, and then she was on her way to the airport. The next thing I needed to do was to call Heather. First, I turned on my old phone. It was full of texts and voice messages from Heather and my mother. My mother's messages started off as worrying, but later became more concerned about how I was since I hadn't replied. Heather's messages went from pleading to angry, then she wondered if I was okay. It had been about 36 hours since my meeting with them. I didn't want to talk to my mother at that moment, but I felt I owed Heather a call. When I called, she answered after one ring. "Oh my God, Thomas, are you okay? Your mother and I were so worried. Where are you?" "I'm fine. I just needed to get away for a bit," I replied. Heather said, "I know the meeting didn't go well. I should have included you in our talks about our future. I'm sorry." "When are you coming back to the apartment and to work?" "Heather, I've said what I needed to say. I'm not coming back. Over the last 3 years, we have been drifting apart. You didn't want to move forward with our relationship and only seemed interested in me based on how your project was going. But that was just because of the project. It's over now. We can start fresh. Your mother and I have been making plans, she replied. I interrupted her. Yes, the two of you have been making plans. What about my plans? Why wouldn't you include me in your plans? She asked. I sighed. Since graduation, you and my mother have been so close. You've kept me out of major decisions and had your staff take care of me when you were busy. I wanted to talk about our future, like our wedding and where we would live, but you kept brushing me aside. The only time we felt like a couple was when we went on vacation and got away from work and my mother. Now, if you want me to stay, are you willing to step back from your role? Maybe go back to Boston and restart the plans we had before graduation. I made my point clear. She was quiet for a moment and then began to cry. But my project means everything to me. Please don't make me choose. I knew this was where our conversation was headed. She wanted to see her work succeed. I guess that's why I had to make the choice for both of us. I'm sorry, Heather. I didn't want to stop you from what you loved, but I need to do something for myself. When you talk to my mother, please tell her I might come back one day. I don't have any hard feelings. I just need some time away from her. I could hear her crying. I then said, Heather, I will call once I settle somewhere. Goodbye. I hung up and turned off my phone. I sat still for a few minutes, thinking of the good times we had, but I knew I had to let go of the past and look forward. I got ready, went to the lobby, and took a taxi to the Lowe's Chemical office for lunch with my great uncle. When I arrived, I went to the reception desk and asked for my uncle. The receptionist asked who she should tell him was waiting. I replied, Please tell him that Tom Hogan is here for lunch. She looked at me curiously as she sent the message. A few minutes later, George came around the corner. He stopped, looked at me, and gave me a big hug. I have been waiting a long time for this moment. I thought it wouldn't happen in my lifetime. You look just like your father. Come on, Susan is waiting in my office for lunch. We chatted as we walked to his office. I thought your mother changed your last name to Prentice, he said. She did, but I plan to change it back. Even though I love my mother, changing my last name took part of my identity away. It's time to take it back. George smiled when he heard that. Well, welcome back to the family. We entered his office and Susan was already there putting together her lunch. She set her plate down and hugged me. Glad we didn't scare you off. We sat down, had lunch, and caught up. My uncle had many questions about my background, education, and plans. He then asked if I wouldn't mind if someone else joined us. I said it was fine. He picked up his phone and shortly after a gentleman arrived with some papers. George introduced us. Tom, this is Ted Ferguson. He is our company lawyer. I asked him to join us because there's still an issue to address after your father's passing. I looked confused and gestured for him to continue. This company was founded by my father, Matthew Hogan. He had 2 sons, myself and your grandfather, Frank. When he passed away, he left us equal shares of the company, 50% for me and 50% for Frank. When Frank passed away, his share was supposed to be divided between your father and Susan. He pointed to Susan, who nodded in agreement. Since your father passed before Frank, the part of the company meant for your father now goes to you. But because you were just 4 years old back then, it has been stored safely. We didn't have any contact with you, so it stayed in trust all these years. Now that you are back, Tom has the paperwork to transfer that trust along with 30 years of profits to you. I leaned back in my chair, surprised. This was unexpected. Wow, I didn't see this coming, thank you. Can we wait a few weeks before making this official? They looked at me in confusion. I turned to Ted. Before I take control of the trust, I want to honor my father and grandfather by changing my name back to Thomas Hogan. Can you help me with that? Tom said. Of course, I would be glad to help. He shook my hand and we finished our lunch. Uncle, there's something else I'd like to discuss with you and Susan. I'm looking for a job. Do you know where I could find one? He smiled. I'm sure we can find something for you here. Based on your education, we would be happy to have you on our team. Is there a specific area you're interested in? I replied, research. I was working on something at Prentice that I want to finish. Don't worry, I own the research, so there won't be any issues with Prentice. I can show you my agreement that proves my ownership. I really just need access to a good lab. Even before learning about the trust, I had enough money to complete the project. George looked at Tom and Susan and said, Let's take a look at what you have and we can work out the details once we know more. Great, I said. George then stood up, saying, "Sadly, Tom and I have meetings to attend." "Susan, why don't you give Tom a tour of our facilities?" Susan replied, "I'd be happy to." "Ted, it was nice meeting you. I might need to travel to San Francisco tomorrow. Can you have the name change paperwork ready for next week?" Ted responded. "I'll prepare the paperwork so we can start the process. It usually takes about 2 months to change a last name in California." I said goodbye to George, who invited me to dinner at his place that night to meet his wife, Nancy. Susan gave me a tour of their facility. They were smaller than Prenti's and didn't have all the equipment I would need, but I had the money to cover any gaps. Lowe's mostly focused on producing chemicals for customers, not doing much research. After the tour, I headed back to my hotel to get ready for dinner. Susan and Nathan were coming to dinner at George's house. They picked me up from my hotel. When we arrived, my great-aunt Nancy welcomed me with a warm hug. We all sat down for dinner and shared memories about my father. They told me many stories about him and our family. After dinner, we moved to the living room. I explained my research on clean jet fuel. I talked about the work that Heather had done and some problems I saw with making it in large amounts. I also explained how her fuel was different from mine. Nancy had once worked for the company but was retired now. She had experience with legal matters and asked about the company's plans for the research started at Prenti's. I described the issues with Heather's patents and mentioned that my mother had signed a release giving me ownership of my research. They expressed excitement about diving into the details, saying that if the research was successful, it could really help Lowe's Chemicals. They noted that they might not have the production capacity needed but would think about that later. After saying our good nights and sharing more hugs, I told them I would visit again the next week. Back at my hotel, I texted Jennifer about my good day and how much I was looking forward to seeing her in San Francisco. She replied with a sweet kiss emoji, and I slept well that night. My flight back to San Francisco was calm. I arrived before lunch and dropped off my things at the hotel. I texted Jennifer to ask about dinner. She was excited and invited me over at 7. I decided it was time to look for a more permanent place in Lowe's Angels. I spent the afternoon browsing websites for short-term furnished rentals. I had left my furniture with Heather, so I wanted to wait before buying new things until I knew how long I would be in LA. I planned to make some calls on Friday. I also thought about facing my mother. I reached out to her secretary, though I wasn't eager to talk to her right now. I asked the secretary to check if my mother could join me for dinner on Friday night. She assured me she would let me know. I drove to Jennifer's apartment, where I had picked her up many times. This would be the first time I entered her home. She opened the door with a big smile and hugged me, welcoming me inside. I noticed her place was quite simple. The dining table was just a card table with folding chairs. She noticed my surprise and explained, "My roommate just got a job in New York and took most of her stuff with her. Sorry, I only have temporary furniture." I said, "Looks like she took everything." She replied, "Well, she owned most of the furniture." She was moving in with her boyfriend in New York, so the one thing she left behind was her bed. However, you can't really sit and eat dinner on it. So I borrowed a card table and some folding chairs until I could find something better. I hugged her and said, "As long as I am having dinner with you, I don't care what your place looks like." She blushed and went to the kitchen. "Dinner will be ready in a few minutes. Just sit and we can eat." While we ate, she asked me how things were going. I told her about the trust and my plans to continue my research at a Lowe's Chemicals with my family. She frowned. "So I guess you will be moving to LA then?" "Yes, but I plan to visit here many weekends to see you, and maybe you can visit me too. I want to see how things go between us. You only have a few months to finish your MBA. By then, I hope to know more about my father's family and how things are between us." She smiled. "Well, you'll need a place to stay when you visit. I doubt you want to stay with your mother or Heather. I do have a spare bed." She left the sentence open. "That would be great." I took her hand gently and kissed it. She came over, hugged me, and sat on my lap. "Could you check out of your hotel tonight?" I asked. "Do you want to come and help me pack?" She grabbed her purse and we headed to the hotel. It took only a few minutes to gather my things and check out. We chatted during the drive. "Jennifer, I want to take this slow. I know we have been friends for years, but I don't want to rush things." "I understand. You just broke up with Heather on Monday. Things might still feel a bit fresh." I want to make sure things are right, too. After unpacking at her place, I realized I needed to get more clothes from my storage locker in the morning. We spent the rest of the night talking and watching a movie on my laptop since her roommate had the couch and TV. Later, we went to our separate rooms for the night. In the morning, Jennifer went to work. She hadn't returned her roommate's key, so she gave it to me. I realized I needed to do some laundry, so I started that while also making calls for temporary housing. I found a few options that were close to the Lowe's Chemicals office and scheduled appointments to check them out the following Tuesday. I emailed Ted, Susan, and my uncle to let them know I would be in their office on Monday, but would be looking for places on Tuesday. My mother's secretary called to say that my mother would be available for dinner tonight and made a reservation for us at her favorite restaurant at 6:00. I went to the storage unit to get more clothes. I went to the lockbox and took photos of the agreement that transferred my research to me. I emailed them to Ted so he could review them. On Sunday, I planned to take a copy of my research from the lockbox to Lowe's Angels. The rest of the afternoon, I focused on reviewing my research and making a list of tools I would need for testing. We needed to reach out to a plane manufacturer to get access to their engines for fuel testing. I looked at the clock and realized it was time for dinner with my mother. When I arrived at the restaurant, she was already there at her usual table where she could see everything happening in the place. I glanced around to make sure she was sitting alone. I half expected her to have brought Heather along. I sat down and picked up the menu. It was quiet, and we both seemed to be waiting for the other to speak first. Finally, she broke the silence. I could hear the strain in her voice as she tried to keep things polite. "So, where have you been?" I didn't want to share too much. "I have been around, checking out potential places to continue my research." Her politeness quickly turned to judgment. It took longer than I thought. "I don't understand. I had everything planned for you. Why are you working on that dead-end research?" "You know, Heather is the future. Look, I can set you up with your own division. You can be the head of it and work on any project you want." "Mother, you just don't understand. Since I was born, you have controlled my path. Now I need to find my own way. I appreciate your support and I love you. I am where I am because of you, but I need to be independent. I do care about Heather, but I have my own plans. You and Heather have your idea of who I should be, but that isn't what I want." She stared at me. I didn't want to argue. I could see the different emotions on her face. "But what about Heather?" "I have talked to Heather. It wasn't easy, but I tried to sort things out. More discussions will be needed." To summarize, since the project started 3 years ago, I have been a second priority after Heather. I have given her chances to take our relationship further, but she hasn't. We need some time apart. I don't know if we will get back together, just like I'm not sure if I'll return to the company. I need time to figure things out on my own. She sighed. "Fine. Do what you want, but don't expect me to come and help you when you realize that you were better off where you started." I chose not to reply. I didn't want to argue. I just wanted to finish our talk and hope she wouldn't hire someone to follow me. We didn't say much for the rest of dinner. She tried to give me updates on her project, and I just nodded, agreeing it sounded good. After we said goodbye, I headed back to Jennifer's apartment. When I got there, Jennifer greeted me with a warm hug. I told her that I made it through the dinner. I asked what she was doing that weekend, and she said she had work for her MBA. I totally understood because I also had things to do for a meeting with Susan and George on Monday. But I told her if she needed a break, she should let me know. On Saturday night, we went out for dinner and a movie. I chose the food and she picked the film. We often had lunches and dinners while working, but this romantic dinner felt like a new step in our relationship. It had been a long time since I had gone out for a special evening like that, and it felt nice to do it with Jennifer. We held hands during the movie and shared kisses during the sweet parts. Afterward, when we returned to her apartment, we lay down on her bed, cuddled for a while, and fell asleep together for the first time. She felt sad when I left for the airport on Sunday, but knew I would come back the next Friday. On Monday, I spent time with Ted. He had the paperwork for my name change, which would take about 2 months. One step in the process was to publish the name change in the legal section of a newspaper in LA for 4 weeks. I chose one that wouldn't attract Heather's or my mother's attention. We also looked over the research agreement my mother signed, and he said it looked solid. Once I brought the original document, We would store it safely with other important company papers. We reviewed another document that George and I would sign, allowing Lowe's A to access my research for review. The rest of the day was spent meeting some of the lab team members on Susan's team. I brought a copy of my research and a list of the equipment we would need. Since I was looking for an apartment on Tuesday, we agreed to continue our work on Wednesday, giving them a day to review everything. On Tuesday, I met the real estate agent and toured 2 locations I had found, as well as 2 more that the agent suggested. I liked one of them, a 3-bedroom apartment in a secure building with separate garages for each unit. The 3rd bedroom was set up as an office. It was available right away, so I signed the lease and got the keys. I made a commitment for 3 months, and then it would be month to month after that. I called Jennifer to share the news that I had found a place. We agreed that I would fly back early Friday afternoon. After that, I would empty the storage locker into my SUV, meet her at her apartment, and we would drive to LA together. She would help me settle in on Saturday and then fly back home on Sunday. The rest of the week, I worked with Susan's team. After George signed the agreement for my research, they reviewed it and asked me questions. We also discussed the benefits of the fuel from my research compared to what Heather and Prentice were making. Susan and George planned to tell me how much they were willing to invest in my research the following week. I flew back on Friday, picked up my things from the storage unit, and then got Jennifer from her place. We began the 6 to 7 hour drive to my apartment in LA. I discovered the unique music Jennifer enjoyed listening to on the way. She and her music made me smile. My feelings for her were growing. We stopped a few times for fast food and breaks, but we made good time. When we arrived at the apartment, we moved the important items from my SUV inside and then fell onto the bed, exhausted. In the morning, I brought the rest of my belongings in, while Jennifer worked on her MBA. In the afternoon, we went shopping for the things I still needed. Since I only had my clothes and some personal items, I had to get almost everything for the kitchen and bathroom. We decided to cook dinner together. It wasn't anything fancy, but it was enjoyable, filled with laughter and little moments of affection as we prepared the meal. After a long day, we cuddled on the couch and watched a movie. I could get used to this. On Sunday, I took her by the Lowe's A Chemicals facility. She pointed out how much smaller it was compared to Prentice, and I agreed. If my fuel works out, that will change. We made one last shopping trip for my apartment to pick up anything we missed. After that, we enjoyed a nice dinner together, but sadly, we had to say goodbye, and I drove her to the airport. She mentioned that she would be free the following weekend, and I told her I would surprise her with something. When she asked what it was, I put a finger to my lips and said it was a secret. The next week was spent finishing the review of my research. Susan and George felt there was some risk, but they decided to have Lowe's A Chemicals fund the remaining research. We reached a financial agreement that would pay me a percentage after Lowe's A Chemicals got their investment back. For me, the best part was that I didn't have to use my investments, except for living costs. Jennifer had been messaging me about a surprise for the next weekend. I had come up with an idea for her, wanting to do something special now that I knew she was free. I talked to Susan to brainstorm romantic getaway ideas. We looked through some options in her office and decided on a cozy cottage in the wine country of Carmel Valley. The cottage had a hot tub and a fire pit, and I also made a dinner reservation for Saturday night at a nice restaurant. I called Jennifer and told her to pack for the weekend, bringing a bathing suit and a couple of bottles of wine. With my agreement with Lowe's A Chemicals ready, I could start planning for the future. The upcoming weeks were going to be about research and project planning. While I liked working on the project, I was most excited about spending time with Jennifer on the weekends. Jennifer picked me up at the airport, and we set off together. I had the cottage's location on my phone's GPS, but kept it secret from her to maintain the surprise. We stopped for dinner on the way and arrived at the cottage around 9:00 p.m. After setting our bags down, we quickly changed into our bathing suits. I stumbled over a piece of furniture when I saw her in hers. She looked beautiful. After she helped me up, she gave me a warm hug. We poured ourselves some wine and jumped into the hot tub. We talked about our week. I shared the good news about the research agreement, and she mentioned that Prentice was making progress with the fuel, though it was slower than expected. I decided not to press too much, knowing I was now working for a different company and wanting to keep things easy between us. Instead, we kept our conversation light. Then, Jennifer had a playful surprise for me. She playfully moved closer and laughed, telling me to just look and not touch. We shared a nice long kiss, and it felt sweet. After a while, we decided to head back inside for the night. We dried off and relaxed, drifting off to sleep in each other's arms. The next day, I had organized a fun wine tour, like a pub crawl but for wineries. I hired a guide to take us from one winery to the next so we could enjoy the wines without worrying about driving. We tasted many different wines and bought a few cases to be shipped to my apartment in LA. The restaurant I booked was just a short walk from the cottage. We had a lovely dinner and started talking about our future together. I asked her if she would like to come to LA with me after she finished her MBA. She took some time to think, and I worried that maybe I had misread our relationship, but she was just waiting for me to look concerned. Then she smiled and said, "Of course I will. I'm really happy with us." "Great. Please send me a copy of your non-compete agreement so I can have a lawyer check it." "Maybe I can find a job nearby for you," I said with a wink. We leaned in and shared a sweet kiss. The evening was a bit chilly, so when we returned to the cottage, I lit a fire in the fire pit, and we enjoyed more wine and roasted marshmallows. We talked about visiting Wisconsin sometime so I could meet her parents. That night we relaxed in the cottage, had more wine, watched a not-so-great movie, and then went to sleep. Waking up with her the next morning was wonderful. I kept my distance, but during the night her shirt rode up a bit. She must have felt me moving because she playfully pushed me away and said with a big smile, "Don't get any ideas. No touching." "Well, I suppose a kiss will have to do," I said and pulled her in for a kiss. Sadly, we had to pack and face reality. We took our time getting back to San Francisco and enjoyed a nice dinner before she dropped me off at the airport. She agreed to visit LA the next weekend, although she would need to work on her MBA. As I watched her drive away, I thought, not sure how long I can wait. I tasted her lipstick on my lips and headed to my flight. The next week was busy as we worked with the team to sort out the needed equipment. Some items wouldn't be ready for another month, so we started on what we could. Jennifer sent me her non-compete agreement, which I reviewed with Ted. It was clear that she couldn't do research for a competing chemical company for 6 months after leaving hers, but it didn't mention anything about managing research projects. I knew it was a bit of a reach, but it allowed me to talk to Susan and George. I met with them and suggested we hire Jennifer as the research manager. Since Lowe's A Chemicals didn't have a strong research team, we needed someone to lead and ease the pressure on Susan. The manager would take care of contracts, updates, and getting the needed resources. Once the non-compete was over, she could be more involved. Her experience at Prentice would be valuable. They asked if I was okay working with my girlfriend. I joked that I was currently working for my mother and having my future managed by my ex-fiancé, so this should be easy. I talked about my plans for the future, and after a quick chat, they agreed. They just wanted to speak with her first before we made an offer. I suggested we have dinner on Saturday night so they could discuss it with her then. The weekend arrived, and I picked up Jennifer from the airport and drove her to the apartment. I asked how much work she had for her MBA and if she could set aside Saturday. She said yes, as long as she worked that night and Sunday before her flight back. I thought that worked out fine. When we got back to the apartment, she started working while I prepared dinner. After cleaning up, I did some work, and then we went to bed for the night. She tried to get hints about Saturday, but I only said we needed to be somewhere at 10 a.m. At 10, we arrived at the first house. That week, I had spoken with the real estate agent who helped me find the apartment about looking for houses. I knew I would eventually need something more permanent. Jennifer looked confused. I explained, I thought we could have some fun imagining our future and checking out possible houses to live in. She seemed excited and nearly ran into the real estate agent when we entered the first house. We visited 4 houses and then reached the 5th and last one for the day. I had seen the details of all these houses, but saved this one for last because I thought it was the best fit. As we walked through, we kept saying, "Wow." The house had been completely renovated and featured a 3-car garage, a huge kitchen, 4 bedrooms, and 2 offices. One bedroom was a master with a large shower and a bathtub for 2. The backyard had a lovely view, a swimming pool, and a hot tub. The expression on her face made it clear this was the one. I nodded to the real estate agent and she began preparing the paperwork. I quickly sent a text and soon Jennifer's phone rang. She answered, "Susan, what can I do for you?" There was a pause and then she said, "Can you hold on a minute? Susan wants to talk to me about something." Jennifer stepped into the backyard. I had planned this with Susan ahead of time. My birthday was next week, and Susan was supposed to keep Jennifer busy while I worked on the offer with the real estate agent. I wanted the house purchased to be a surprise. The house price was $6 million, but she suggested starting with an offer of $5.7 million since it had been on the market for some time. We finished the paperwork just as Jennifer returned. I had to keep up the act, so I asked, "What did Susan want?" Jennifer paused for a moment, thinking hard, and then said, "Susan was making a dish tonight and wanted to know if I had cooked it before and if I had any tips." I nodded, accepting her answer. We wandered around the house a bit longer, and I said, "Just think, one day we might buy one of these for our future family." She hugged me and said, "That sounds like a wonderful dream." We thanked the real estate agent, and I gave her a wink. We had already agreed to talk again on Monday about the offer. When we got back to my apartment, we freshened up. At that point, Jennifer was teasing me and started to change in front of me. I still wanted to wait for the right moment, but she was making it really hard to stay patient. We arrived at Susan's home, where George and Nancy were already there, along with Susan's kids, Patricia and Frank, as well as Patricia's fiancé, Jose. I introduced Jennifer to everyone, and we chatted in the family room while Nathan and Susan set the dinner table. During the meal, we talked about different things. I learned about Frank's job teaching English in high school and Patricia's work as a chemical engineer. Jose mentioned he worked at an investment firm, so we discussed investments for a while. For dessert, they brought out a birthday cake and sang happy birthday to me. This was my first birthday with my father's side of the family since I was 3. I was so touched that I cried and thanked everyone. After the cake, Susan and George asked to speak with Jennifer. They went into Susan's home office while the rest of us relaxed in the family room. When they returned, Jennifer looked really happy and both Susan and George gave me a thumbs up. We chatted more before everyone said goodnight. On the drive back, Jennifer asked, "Did you know they were going to offer me a job?" "I might have had an idea," I said with a smile. "Was that your idea?" she asked. "I might have helped a bit," I replied. She playfully punched my shoulder and kissed my cheek. "This means I will be your boss," she teased. "Well, only for a bit," I said. "What do you mean by that?" she asked. "My plan after graduation was to take a research position at a college and teach. Once we get the fuel into production, I hope to do that. Then our careers will be separate. You'll do amazing things with or without me." She kissed my cheek again. "Thank you for believing in me." We went to bed early so she could get up early for her MBA work. With the job offer now, it was even more important for her to stay on track. While she worked, I took care of something exciting, laundry. I also made lunch and dinner for us. We had a nice moment on the couch, and then I took her to the airport. Before she left, I told her I would bring the job offer when I came to San Francisco next weekend. The week was pretty quiet. Well, unless you count buying the house and getting Jennifer's job offer ready. Those were big steps for me. I had to raise my offer on the house by $100,000, but I still managed to get it for less than they asked. The house passed its inspection, and I set the closing date for 4 weeks from now. I included in my offer that I could visit the house twice and reached out to Susan's interior designer. We planned to meet at the house to check it out. I flew into San Francisco on Friday night. Jennifer picked me up, and we grabbed a quick meal before heading to her place for the weekend. She was finishing her MBA, so I wanted to give her as much time as she needed to work. Soon, we would be in the same city, the same company, and the same house, although she didn't know that yet. Saturday was stressful because it was my mother's birthday dinner. Jennifer came with me to the restaurant. I had told my mother I was bringing a guest since Jennifer had just received her job offer and was close to finishing her MBA. I figured it was a good time to let her know we were together. My mother was already there, and unexpectedly, so was Heather. She jumped up to give me a hug, but then noticed Jennifer with me. The mood got a bit tense. I squeezed Jennifer's hand to show her we were together. Jennifer said, "Hello, Heather." Heather coolly replied, "I didn't know you were dating." I stepped in because I wanted to explain things. "Well, after I broke up with you and left, Jennifer called me a few days later to check on me. We had a nice conversation and realized we had enjoyed so many lunches and dinners together, so we thought we would see if there was something more between us and started to date. We're not sure where it's going, but we wanted to give it a try." Heather looked upset and glanced at my mother. I sensed they might want to arrange something between us tonight, but Jennifer's presence made that tricky. My mother then said, "Well, Jennifer, we're happy to have you here to celebrate Thomas's birthday." We had dinner, but Heather and my mother mostly tried to ignore Jennifer and asked me questions about what I had been up to for the last month. I just said I was close to finding a place for my research. A few times, I gently touched Jennifer's leg under the table to remind her I was there and thinking of her during the tough meeting. They tried to bring me back into the group, saying everything was going well with the fuel project. Jennifer touched my leg back, letting me know that the problems I had warned about were starting to happen. After dinner and a cupcake with a candle, we said our goodbyes. As we walked to her car, we heard Heather and my mother arguing about Jennifer. Once we got into the car, I said, "I know you weren't going to quit your job for another week, but if things get difficult with Heather, you can leave early. If you need anything, like money or help moving out of San Francisco, just let me know." Jennifer smiled and hugged me. When we got to her apartment, we were getting comfortable when her mother called. She wanted to ease Jennifer's worries, but told her that her father was sick and in the hospital. He was going to be fine, just staying there for a few days with a respiratory infection. Jennifer asked if she should come home, but her mother said no. They talked for a bit about her father's health, and by the end of the call, Jennifer seemed less worried. We discussed it for a while. As we got ready for bed, I suggested, "How about we take next Friday and the following Monday off and fly to see your parents? Your mom said he should be out of the hospital by then." Jennifer thought that was a great idea. I joked, "And you can show off your wonderful new boyfriend." She laughed and asked, "Who would that be?" Then playfully pushed me onto the bed and kissed me. She dropped me off at the airport on Sunday night. I had her signed job offer with me, which I happily handed to Susan and George when I got to the office on Monday. On Wednesday, I met with the interior designer, Cheryl. She had a copy of the plans from the recent renovations and confirmed everything was correct, taking lots of photos. I wanted her to create a design that we would discuss with Jennifer. I knew it was important to have her input before starting any painting. Since both Jennifer and I had Friday and Monday off, we booked our flights to visit her parents. Jennifer shared that her relationship with Heather at work had grown distant. Heather only spoke to her when necessary, and we thought she was relieved that Jennifer would be out of the office for a few days. On Thursday night, Jennifer flew in from San Francisco, and we were set to leave early Friday morning for her hometown of Madison, Wisconsin. Jennifer's dad was feeling better and resting at home. Her mother, Molly, welcomed us at the door. Jennifer hugged her mother tightly. Molly took a moment to look me over and said, "So you are the guy my daughter has been talking about for years. Welcome." She gave me a big hug, and I noticed Jennifer turning red. "Talking about me?" I asked. "Well, I might have mentioned you a couple of times," Jennifer replied with a smile. Her dad, Arthit, was relaxing in a comfy chair watching TV. He tried to get up to greet us, but both Jennifer and her mother told him to stay seated. He rolled his eyes at me, and I shrugged in sympathy. Jennifer hugged him, and I shook his hand. He said he was glad Jennifer finally brought someone home to meet them. We spent the day chatting. They shared their story about moving to the U.S. and why they chose Madison. I told them about my family and how I had reconnected with them. After dinner, Arthit began to feel tired, so he went to bed. Molly said he would be back to normal in a few days, so we shouldn't worry. She then showed me the guest room before going to their bedroom. Jennifer told me that her parents were quite traditional, so we would be sleeping in separate rooms. They knew they couldn't control her outside the house, but the rules at home were strict. I assured her it was a small price to pay. On Saturday, we relaxed at home. Jennifer had some schoolwork to do, and I helped her mother with lunch. That evening, Jennifer planned for us to go out with her friends from high school and college. Since they were all married, I sensed I might be put to the test. There were 12 of us at the restaurant. During dinner, her friends kept a close eye on me. I felt a bit nervous, but Jennifer kept smiling at me. She mentioned before dinner that she was excited to be showing me off. After dinner, we went to a dance club. Jennifer pulled me onto the dance floor where I clumsily tried to keep up. While she danced with her friends, her best friend, Harper, sat next to me. She said she had never seen Jennifer so happy and that I must be doing something right, but then she warned me that if I hurt Jennifer, her friends would come looking for me. I replied that only good friends look out for each other. I asked for her phone number to reach out for advice about Jennifer. We quickly exchanged numbers before Jennifer returned to the table. She must have noticed us because she asked what we were talking about. I just said that Harper was telling me how much trouble I would be in if I hurt her. Jennifer laughed and then pulled both Harper and me back onto the dance floor. By the end of the night, we were really tired. We shared a sweet moment on the front deck of her parents' house before heading to our separate rooms for the night. Sunday was nice and calm. Arthit was feeling much better and was busy with chores. I was helping him in the backyard when he decided to talk to me about my relationship with Jennifer. "I hope you understand, but I worry about my only child," he said. "I get it. One day I hope to worry about my own child and that their mother will be Jennifer," I replied. He smiled widely and gave me a hug. Since I didn't know when we would visit again, I shared my plans for the future with his daughter. I asked him to keep it a secret and mentioned the house. If things went well, I wanted to know if I could ask her to marry me. He gave me a pat on the back and said, "She has been talking about you a lot this past year. She thinks you are perfect, but she was sad when you were engaged to someone else. We may have just met, but you seem to be what she hoped for. You make my daughter very happy, and if one day you decide to ask, I would be happy to welcome you into our family." I thanked him and hugged him again. Then I said, "I hope that when the time comes, you can be in LA to see it." We were both smiling when we walked back into the house. Jennifer watched us closely. "What are you two smiling about?" I replied. "Arthit was just telling me all the mischief you got into as a kid. I told him you still like to get into some trouble." I winked at her. She turned red and playfully punched me in the arm. On Monday, we had to head home. Arthit and Molly gave us big hugs as we left. Her dad was almost back to normal and would return to work later in the week. During the flight back, we talked about our visit, her parents, and her friends. She mentioned how much her parents liked me. Jennifer felt so much more at ease now that she had time with her dad and knew he would be okay. Back home on Tuesday, I called Jennifer's best friend, Harper. I asked if she could keep a secret from Jennifer. She said she could. I shared my plans about the house and asked if I could connect my interior designer with her for ideas about Jennifer's style. My experience with her style was mostly based on her apartment having just a card table for a dining table, which didn't help much. Harper was really happy and said she would love to help. Jennifer gave her resignation to Heather. Both Heather and my mom sensed it might be connected to me and my research, so they decided to walk her out. Jennifer felt let down, but I promised her everything would be fine and that she could focus on finishing her MBA. The next 2 weeks were quite quiet. Jennifer visited me in LA one weekend, and I visited her the following weekend. During my visit to San Francisco, we talked to some movers about getting her belongings to LA. She was finishing her MBA that week, so she planned to move by the end of the week. Since she wasn't aware of the house, we agreed she would bring as many clothes as she could on her Friday night flight to start settling into my apartment. Then, we would return later to move the rest of her things once we figured everything out. I picked up Jennifer at the airport and brought her suitcases to my apartment. She had brought some extra bags and paid for them so she could carry as much as possible. We ordered dinner and tried to figure out where to put everything. The next day was going to be special, but she had no idea. We were tired by the time we finished and went to bed. We woke up early the next morning. She was planning to unpack, but I told her we had an appointment at 10 a.m. Curious, she asked where we were going, but I said it was a surprise. We reached the house on time and saw the real estate agent's car waiting outside. I opened the gate and the agent followed us into the driveway. As we got out of the car, I asked Jennifer if she remembered the agent. She did, and they shook hands. When I opened the door, Jennifer started asking questions. "Why are we here?" I answered, "This is the house you liked, right?" She nodded, so I continued. "We have some paperwork for you to sign." "What paperwork?" she asked as the real estate agent pulled out a paper and pen. "Well, you want your name on the deed, right?" Her voice rose with surprise. "Are we buying this house?" "No," I replied. "I already bought it. This is to add your name to the deed." She stared at me, trying to understand. Then she jumped up to hug me and gave me a quick kiss. Excited, she ran over to the real estate agent, eager to sign the papers. The agent smiled widely as we watched Jennifer complete the paperwork. After wishing us well, the agent left. "So, do you want to see our new house?" I asked, smiling. "You planned this all along, didn't you?" "Yes, I actually bought the house right after we saw it. I knew this would be the one, so I asked the real estate agent to show it to us last. I wanted to surprise you." Holding hands, we explored the house, talking about what we could do in each room. When Heather and I first became close, it was after a party where we both had too much to drink. Honestly, we didn't remember much of what happened. I wanted my first experience with Jennifer to be special. As we entered the master bedroom, Jennifer paused. I had a bed delivered and decorated the room with red roses. Looking into her eyes, I took her face in my hands and kissed her gently. "I think I am ready," I said. She smiled shyly, and I felt her excitement. I suggested she lie on the bed, and starting with her lips, I kissed my way down her body. She smiled as I continued to kiss her softly. We enjoyed the moment together. When it was her turn, she stood up and began carefully undoing my shirt, kissing me after each button. Then, with a playful move, she gently pushed me onto the bed. We shared soft kisses, feeling closer to each other. After a while, I paused and asked if she would like to continue. I wanted everything to feel right and special for both of us. We talked and laughed, enjoying this new chapter in our lives. I looked at her and said, "Welcome to your new house, my love." She giggled and replied, "Well, I guess since we've made some memories here, we can't return it." Then she kissed me again softly. Afterward, we held each other close for a few moments. "Do you want to check out the shower?" I asked. She took my hand and led me that way, excited to explore together. I also brought some towels and bathrobes to make it more comfortable. I had remembered her favorite shampoo, so the shower was ready. We enjoyed using the large shower for the first time. While we didn't get intimate, we had fun washing and playfully touching each other. As we wrapped up in the shower, I glanced at the clock on my phone and said, "Good, we have 30 minutes to get ready." "Ready for what?" she asked. "Lunch is being delivered at 12:30. "Wow, you have a lot of surprises today," she replied, her voice playful. Just as we finished drying off and getting dressed, the doorbell rang. I opened the door and in walked the interior designer. I introduced Cheryl to Jennifer and I helped Cheryl bring in the items from her car. Jennifer looked surprised and asked, "This isn't just lunch, right?" "No, Cheryl is an interior designer and I asked her to bring some ideas for the house." We sat down to go over the design ideas. Cheryl had a program that showed 3D models of each room with different options for many of them. I prioritized the living spaces, our bedroom, and the office so we could move in quickly. We could explore the other rooms later. Jennifer said, "Wow, Cheryl, you really understand my style. These all look great." Cheryl smiled, saying, "Thank you." I had some help. Jennifer looked surprised and asked me, "Harper helped with this?" I nodded, grinning. Just then, Jennifer called Harper on her phone. When Harper answered, Jennifer exclaimed, "You knew about the house and didn't tell me." I could hear Harper laughing. After some back and forth, Jennifer said, "I love you too," then gave me a mischievous look and told Harper, "Don't worry, I'll fill you in on everything." After hanging up, Jennifer hugged me tightly and said, "I love you. Tonight is going to be special." We tidied up a bit, and she picked some roses from the bedroom to take back to the apartment. As dinner time approached, we decided to go out for a nice meal, talking about the house and our future together. Once we got back to the apartment, she led me to the bedroom, eager to continue our evening. She did a fantastic job because I felt so sore in muscles I never knew I had when I tried to get out of bed on Sunday morning. Monday marked the start of Jennifer's career at Lowe's A Chemicals. She spent most of the day with Susan and the research team. The three of us had lunch with George. Susan looked at me at first, and Jennifer giggled, so I guessed they had talked about the weekend. All the equipment was now ready, and the team could move forward with their work on the fuel. Jennifer and I stayed in touch with Cheryl as she organized things at the house. The painters were coming this week, and the furniture was ordered for delivery the following week. On Friday, we flew back to San Francisco to finish up with her apartment. We packed everything for the movers to pick up and take to the house on Sunday. On Saturday, Habitat for Humanity was picking up all her furniture since we were getting new items for the house, and she didn't want any of it. This meant the beds were packed for the move, so we stayed at a hotel. Everything went smoothly. After the movers loaded everything, she returned her keys and we drove back to LA in her car. We met the movers at the house, and everything was unloaded into one of the spare bedrooms. By the end of the weekend, we were exhausted. We looked forward to moving into the house in a few weeks. This week held another important event for me, the court date to finalize my name change and transfer the trust to me. With a tap of the gavel, I was officially Thomas Hogan again. When we got back to the office, Ted and I completed the paperwork for the trust transfer and worked on everything that needed updating with my new name. I thought I had a good amount of savings, but the trust had built up over 30 years, and it was worth even more. For the next 2 months, we worked steadily and made great progress. At home, we got the house all set up. Every room was decorated and furnished. At work, Jennifer and I worked well together, even though she was the boss. We promised to keep our personal lives separate from work, but that didn't always happen. If we had a difficult day, we found comfort in each other. When days went well, our time together was energetic and fun. Most of the time, our moments were gentle and rewarding. We invited Harper and her husband for the weekend to show off all the work they helped put together. Her husband and I enjoyed drinks by the pool while we admired our partners as they relaxed in the sun. We were close to finishing our research. The patent applications were being prepared for submission. Next, we needed to plan for production. Jennifer and I realized we needed some help and found the right person to lead this effort. We were in a meeting with Susan and George about the project. Jennifer, as head of research, took charge while I provided additional comments. And now we move to the next topic. Tom and I decided we need someone to lead the work on producing the fuel, Jennifer said. Susan and George nodded in agreement. Jennifer continued, "So Tom and I have recruited someone for this role." George interjected, "I thought we agreed that all hiring decisions needed approval from Susan and me. We should both be part of the interview process for such an important position." At this point, I chimed in. "Well, Jennifer and I have been talking to this candidate for over a month, and it took a while to convince her to join us." Susan asked, "Well, who is it?" I got up and walked to George's office door, opening it to signal someone to come in. Patricia, Susan's daughter, entered the room. "I'd like you to meet our new head of production, Patricia Hogan. I believe you may have met her before." Susan jumped up and hugged her daughter tightly. "Are you sure about this? You were hesitant to join the company before because you wanted to create your own path. Well, Cousin Tom and Jennifer convinced me, and working on getting this fuel into production will be a big achievement for me. I had to take the chance," Patricia replied. "Welcome to the company, then," George said proudly, giving her a hug and shaking her hand. Jennifer added, "I guess we need to get you started," as she took Patricia to her new office and introduced her to the team. Susan hugged me, and I said, "We needed a chemical engineer to work on production, and having one in the family is a great advantage." Word was that Prentice Chemicals was struggling to produce their version of the fuel at an affordable cost. This had become well known. My mother, the CEO, was facing challenges. Their stock was dropping significantly. With help from Ted and the investment firm where Patricia's fiancé, Jose, works, I set up several companies to start buying Prentice stock at lower prices. I purchased the stock in small amounts through these companies to avoid drawing unwanted attention from the market or my mother. 4 months later, at Lowe's A Chemicals, we finally reached a big goal. We had completed our research and showed that our production process worked. We began talking with other chemical companies to license and produce our fuel. We sent out press releases and held a big party for all the staff at an off-site venue. There was food, drinks, and dancing. George, Susan, and Jennifer spoke to thank everyone for their hard work and shared that bonuses would be good this year, which made everyone cheer. Then, they called me to say a few words. I was just outside the room gathering a couple of special guests I had invited. When they called for me louder, I walked into the room with Jennifer's parents behind me. I thanked everyone for their efforts and then walked over to Jennifer. I told her I had special words for her. Jennifer, we started as lunch friends, but you have become very important to me. You have played a big part in the success of our fuel project and have been such a support to me. You gave me the confidence to try things I might not have done without you." Then, I got down on one knee. Jennifer began to cry. I continued, "That is why I can't imagine my life without you. I love you. Will you marry me?" I pulled out an engagement ring. She jumped up and down, saying, "Yes." Then she gave me a big hug. Everyone applauded and cheered as I placed the ring on her finger. George, Susan, and her parents came over to congratulate us first. The rest of the party felt like a blur. Jennifer's parents had flown in the night before, and Jose helped them get from the airport to their hotel and then to the party. They planned to stay in our guest room that night. When we got home, Jennifer showed them around the house. They were impressed with everything, especially the pool and the view. We flew to San Francisco for dinner with my mother to tell her our exciting news. She was happy for us. We talked about many things except for work. She asked about the engagement, and we shared some thoughts on wedding plans. She also mentioned that Heather had started dating, and I was glad to hear that she was moving forward. However, our announcement had a big impact on Prenti's Chemicals. My mother was removed as CEO and chairwoman of the board. They hired a new leader who focused on selling companies. This new CEO ended Heather's project and let her go. I reached out to my mother and Heather to check on how they were doing. As Mother still had 30% of the stock, she made sure that Heather and herself were on the board to keep control over future decisions. She was still determined to keep her company. I quickly bought more shares, and through a numbered company, we reached out to the new chairman of Prenti's about our plan to buy Prenti's Chemicals. At this point, I had 10% of the company and had bought another 20%. The value of the shares was very low because of the debt they had taken on to build new production facilities for their fuel. I had a senior manager from the investment firm where Jose worked represent me in the early talks. Our offer needed to go to the Prenti's board for their approval. Along with our investment executive, George, Susan, Jennifer, and I were at the meeting. When George and Susan came in with Ted and the investment executive, Mother stood up when she recognized them. I believe she was about to object until she saw Jennifer and me right behind them. I noticed her expression change when she understood what was happening. Our investment executive and I presented to the board. He introduced everyone, and my mother was surprised when I was introduced as Tom Hogan. I hadn't told her that I had changed my name back. I know it was not kind for her to find out that way, but changing my name to Prenti's and leaving out my father's family had caused me a lot of hurt. Now, I felt we were even. We made our pitch and offered a price for the shares we wanted to buy. As part of our proposal, we were going to give my mother a share in the new company. Her 30% of Prenti's would equal 5% of the new company. If she accepted, the new company would be called Hogan Prenti's Chemicals. If she refused, it would be called Hogan Chemicals. This was our way of keeping the Prenti's name alive for her. The board approved the deal, and my mother agreed to the ownership change. Before the merger, I owned 25% of Lowe's A Chemicals, Susan had 25%, and George had 50%. After the merger, George and Susan's shares combined to 50%, while my share grew to 45%, and my mother held the remaining 5%. In the following days, we started planning for the new combined company. We were still relatively small in the chemical market, so the merger didn't need a review by the Federal Trade Commission. We just needed to wait for the share purchases to go through. I was using most of my savings to buy Prenti's. It was a risk, but once we finished changing the factories they had built for Heather's fuel to work with my fuel, we expected big profits. Jennifer led the merger work. She worked with Patricia, and Heather was hired back to join the leadership team. Together, they formed the new executive group. Jennifer and I later marked the moment in private. That night after we got home, we chose to relax together. I brought 2 glasses of champagne and sat in the warm water. When Jennifer joined me, we talked, laughed, and enjoyed the quiet view. We stayed close and let the stress of work fade away. It felt good to slow down after so many long days. At one point, Jennifer joked about work experiments and testing ideas in real life. Her playful mood made me smile. After a while, we moved inside. We teased each other and turned it into a small game. I knew she had the advantage, but I did not mind losing. The warm shower helped us relax even more. We stayed close and shared gentle touches and laughter. When we were done, we cleaned up together and dried off. Later, we went to bed. I held her and we rested side by side. Soon, we both fell asleep, calm and satisfied after a long day. Epilogue: the merger went well. After everything settled down, George called me into his office. He took out a bottle of whiskey and poured 2 glasses. I took one, and after looking at him for a moment, he said, "I think it's time for me to retire. The new company needs fresh ideas for the future." I realized he had wanted to step down so he and Nancy could enjoy their time without work stress. "You'll be missed," I said. "I know, but I wanted to speak with you before telling everyone," he replied, pausing to look at me. "You're still planning to take that position at UCLA in the Applied Chemistry department, right?" "Yes, I really want to return to teaching and research like I intended when I graduated. Besides, I'm getting tired of working with my fiancé," I joked. He laughed. "Good, because I didn't want family drama over my recommendation that Susan become president." "I support that choice," I said. "She is the best person to follow you. You have my support of the company behind that decision." "Great," he said. "Now we need to think about a VP of operations. Do you think Jennifer would be interested?" I smiled. "I believe she would be thrilled. When will you announce this?" "Since everyone is at my place for dinner tonight, I think that's when I'll share the news," he said. We clinked our glasses and reminisced about the past. Dinner was winding down, and George stood to speak to everyone. Nancy, Susan, her family, my mother, Jennifer, and I were all there. Only George, Nancy, and I knew what was coming next. "Nancy and I have talked, and it's time for me to step aside and retire." Everyone looked surprised. He continued, "With the new company and its direction, it's time for the next generation to take charge." Since Tom and I have control of the company, we held an informal vote over a drink. He looked at Susan. "Susan, I think it's your time to take the lead." She glanced at me and I smiled and nodded. Susan stood up. "George, thank you. This means a lot to me. I hope to do as well as you have." She walked over and hugged him. They spoke quietly for a moment. Susan looked at me, then at Jennifer, and I nodded again, understanding the conversation. "Jennifer," Susan said, "we need to find someone to fill my role as VP of operations. Do you think you're ready for that?" Jennifer looked surprised again, taking in the news around the dinner table. She turned to me for support. I gave her a big smile and nodded to show I agreed. She smiled back and said to Susan, "Yes, I would be happy to, thank you." The Hogan Prentice Chemical Company went through many changes. Jennifer had a long talk with Heather. She knew Heather had many more ideas besides just fuel, so she encouraged her to take the job of head of research. Although Heather learned from a past project that didn't go well, they often disagreed but still came up with many new ideas that helped the company grow. Heather stayed in San Francisco, where the research division for the merged company was based. She had also moved on from our past and started dating a math professor at Stanford. My mother moved to Boston and accepted a role at Harvard as an advisor. Her knowledge in business and chemistry was valuable to the business, chemistry, and chemical engineering departments. 3 months after the merger, Jennifer and I got married in a lovely ceremony. Harper was her maid of honor and Jose was my best man. He and Patricia had just married 2 months before. We spent our honeymoon touring Thailand, and Jennifer's parents joined us for part of the trip to show us around their country. Over the next 5 years, we were blessed with 3 wonderful children. When my mother fell ill and before she passed away, we announced the opening of the Prentice Research Complex at Harvard, which made her very happy. She was glad to know that our family name would always be linked with Harvard, and she passed away peacefully. When Susan retired, Jennifer became the president of the company. It continued to grow under both of their leaderships. I worked at UCLA until I retired. Jennifer and I had the George Hogan Research Building built at UCLA, and during our retirement, we enjoyed relaxing by the pool, admiring the view and watching our grandchildren. Author's note: I hope you enjoyed the story. I have been talking to other authors to learn about how they write their stories and how those stories change over time. If anyone is curious, here are my original ideas that led to chemistry. It is interesting to look back at my early notes after finishing a story. 2 PhD chemistry students in love, finishing their dissertations. After graduation, she had an idea to create a new synthetic fuel based on my dissertation. I saw her idea and realized how much further it could go. My mother is the CEO of a large chemical company, and we took our proposals to her. She was very excited about hers, but less so about mine. 2 years later, she had a breakthrough, while mine was taking longer. When she went to file a patent, her assistant noticed some problems with it. The assistant came to me, and I brought the issue to her and my mother, but they ignored me again. My now fiancé was starting to become a bit arrogant, much like my mother. The company announces a big discovery, and my fiancé goes on a press tour. She gets asked about our relationship. Some of her answers sound like me, but others don't. I ask my mother about it, and she brushes it off, saying I'm overthinking things. I talk to my fiancé, and she tells me it was my mother's idea not to mention me. She worries it could hurt her credibility if people find out she is engaged to the CEO's son. I'm not convinced. I go back to my mother. There's another delay in my research, and I'm feeling frustrated. I need support from my fiancé's team, but I'm not getting it. My mother says she will consider it. I then overhear a call where my mother is canceling my project. She only funded it to keep me happy while the focus was on my fiancé. I start gathering copies of my work. My mother officially announces the cancellation of my project, and I see more articles suggesting my fiancé might be involved with someone else. One of my fiancé's assistants believes in my research and decides to leave as well. After a disagreement, my mother finally agrees to release my research to me, but it seems like my efforts are in vain. I break up with my fiancé because she doesn't support me. I resign and take my research to a competitor. I point out a flaw in their patent and explain that my research will only take 4 to 6 months to finish. They agree to negotiate a favorable deal, thinking my mother might not back me, and they offer that I work with them for 5 years to cover costs if it doesn't succeed. My assistant and I work tirelessly, almost 24 hours a day, and finally make a breakthrough. We are so excited that we share a kiss. Next, we present our findings to the executives and file for a patent. We hold a big press tour, and my assistant and I begin to date. Then, I get sued by my mother's company. After a long legal battle, my mother is removed as CEO, and my fiancé is also let go because of issues related to the patent that the trial revealed they knew about. Eventually, I marry my assistant. She turns out to be excellent at reviewing proposals and is promoted to VP of Research. To avoid any conflict, I take a teaching position at a university while the company funds my research. Later, at a conference, I run into my fiancé. She and my mother are now working for a small chemical company, with my mother as the VP. She notices my wedding ring, and I confirm that I'm married. She mentions she has an idea but thinks it wouldn't work at her current job. She asks if I could look at it, and I say I can, but she'll need to check with her company's VP of Research. Oh, here she is.